Hello and welcome to this special edition of People, Politics and Power. It is the International Workers' Day, otherwise known in Nigeria as May Day. Now, it is the last May Day celebration under the President Muhammadu Buhari administration after 8 years in office. In fact, just 1 month shy of 8 years in office. I am Imoni Amarere. Now, how did workers and organized labor fare in the last 8 years of the Buhari government? Some watchers of industrial relations say it has been 8 tumultuous years of struggles, pains, tears, and some triumphs. What the legendary musician and social critic Fela Anikulapo Kuti called suffering and smiling. In 2019, workers' agitations for a new minimum wage in the face of harsh economic realities bore fruit with an upward review of the minimum wage from 18,000 to 30,000 naira. But that did not prevent more industrial turbulence that subsequently hit the country, as the gains from that were swiftly wiped off by inflation, high cost of living, and high food prices, occasioned in part by the widespread insecurity across the country. Series of strikes and protests over government economic policies and decisions, poor wages and welfare, especially in tertiary educational institutions and the medical sector, has dogged almost every step of the administration. The manufacturing sector remains comatose 8 years on, resulting in high levels of unemployment and, some will say, misery. But in the twilight of the regime, a 40% increase in the wages of civil servants has been announced. Commendable as it seems, it is already generating tensions in other sectors of the economy, which may blow over sooner than later, as there are already ultimatums and threats of industrial actions being issued from different quarters. What has been the relationship between governments and labor at different levels? In the last 8 years, organized labor itself has gone through some changes, including leadership changes. How have those changes in the various labor centers affected the fortunes of the Nigerian workforce? Have there been any fundamental, ideological, or institutional changes in the way labor has been organized, led, and operated in the last 8 years? Has it lived up to the aspirations and expectations of its members spread across various sectors of the Nigerian economy? Is the Nigerian worker better off today than 8 years ago when Buhari came into office on May 29, 2015? If not, what were the challenges? Have there been tangible high points for workers in the last 8 years? If there are, how sustainable are they moving forward? On the program today, we shall be looking back and projecting forward into the future of labor-government relations and their roles in the urgent task of refloating the badly bruised Nigerian economy and giving hope to millions of Nigerians who are said to be multidimensionally poor. Well, these are the issues we'll be taking a look at on the program, and I'm joined in the studio by 3 labor leaders. First, from my immediate right is Comrade John Oda, former General Secretary of the Nigerian Labour Congress, NLC, and currently the Executive Secretary of Organizations of Trade Unions of West Africa, OTUA. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mark, and happy May Day.
Happy May Day. Also joining us in the studio is Dr. Tommy Etim Okon. He is the National President, Association of Senior Civil Servants of Nigeria, an affiliate of the TUC.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining
Happy May
us.
Day too.
We're also joined by Onu Edoka, the National Vice Chairman, Medical and Health Workers Union, and two-time Kogi State Chairman of the Nigeria Labour Congress. Mr. Edoka, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and
Welcome.
happy International Day.
Welcome. Happy May Day, as we say in Nigeria.
Yeah,
Right. So let's begin this way, Comrade Order. 8 years of labor-government relations. How would you describe it?
Thank you again, Mark. The 8 years of the outgoing administration of President Buhari hasn't been the best for Nigerian workers, and there are several indices to show for it. Nigerians, not just workers, expected so much from President Buhari, who had campaigned over 3 times to be president of this country. And people had hoped that, given his austere lifestyle and his avowed anti-corruption credentials, things were going to be different. But talking specifically about the effect of his administration on Nigerian workers, I was reading one of the paper editorial today, and the paper drew attention to the fact that by 2015, when President Buhari assumed office, rice, 50 kg of rice was selling for 10,000 naira. Today, the same 50 kg of rice is selling for 40,000 naira. 4 years ago, workers got an increase in minimum wage from 18,000 to 30,000, as you indicated in your report. So if you have a family of husband and wife and 4 children, and they have to depend on this minimum wage, you can't even buy them a 50 kg bag of rice. That's how terrible the situation has been. And to compound the situation, also as you have indicated, across the 36 states of the country, the 30,000 minimum wage had not been uniformly implemented in a way to augment the take-home pay of workers across the states. So one can say without any fear of any contradiction that the 8 years of the outgoing government has been very difficult for Nigerian workers.
Dr. Okon, you are the national president of the Association of Senior Civil Servants. Let's take that segment of the Nigerian workforce. Civil servants, what were their experience, or what has been their experience in the last 8 years of the Buhari administration?
Well, thank you very much. I want to align with my comrade, the last speaker, Comrade John Ode. And I want to say, with all sense of modesty, it has been a very harsh working environment for Nigerian workers, especially the core civil servant. You know, 30,000 naira minimum wage, past 4, 5, getting to 5 years by next year, it was worrisome. When you look at the inflation rate, you know, and it was a concern. It was serious concern. And let me also correct some impression because of the last approval of 40% peculiar allowance. It wasn't a salary increase, because that will definitely come by next year, where we are going to negotiate the minimum wage again. It was just a peculiar allowance for core civil servants who are under consolidated public service salary structure because of the situation. And when you look at that 40%, compared to the present day inflation rate, I think it's about 22.04. So it has eaten even the 40%. Because when you look at a kilo of gas today, 12.5 kg is over 10,000 naira. You know, I don't want to talk about rice because that is luxury. Let us look at Gari, where we produce, you know, a cup of Gari goes for 250 naira. So a cup of Gari. So when you have a size of about 5, you know, immediate or nucleus family, not to talk of the extended family as in line with African own tradition, you are in for it. So the last 8 years have been very turbulent, very worrisome, operating in a very harsh working condition. The insecurity alone. How many workers have been kidnapped? You know, we just lost our comrade in the last 1 year because of the Kaduna road insecurity challenges. These are fear factors that have created that productivity comes with suspect. If going by the Mr. President Buhari's campaign manifesto, we talk about addressing insecurity, corruption, and so on, I think Nigeria will have been better for it. But in all, I can say, well, there's light in the dark of the tunnel. We appreciate the 40% peculiar allowance for the core civil service, but it is not yet Uhuru.
Okay, Mr. Doka, let's look at the medical and health sector. That's one sector that's had a very turbulent time, so to say. In the last couple of years, there have been series of protests, strikes, and what have you in that sector. And added to that is the fact that we have had and continue to have a number of health professionals move out of Nigeria, seek greener pastures outside of the country. What do you think went wrong in the last 8 years, particularly with the health sector?
I think first and foremost, I would say happy May Day to all Nigerians, and to be very specific to your question and addressing it directly. The government itself was responsible largely for all the crises within the health sector itself, and did not really approach issues of the health sector holistically. They started playing issues of making one sector within the health sector much more important than the other sector. And along the line, the salary implementation of the different health sector salaries were not being carried along in the course of its implementation, making it very difficult for those within the health sector to see themselves as one body who requires each other to achieve what they think is within the health industry. And I want to believe too well too that if the government itself at the federal level had thought well, they would have seen that sitting down with the entire workforce of the health sectors, inclusively all the trade unions within the health sector, discussing with them about the interest for which they have, it would have been more better to address all their issues holistically at a point. Secondly, you will agree with me too well that in the course of the service provided within the health sector, the government is not meeting up those conditions that are required by the workers in the health sector to be able to meet up the tools and equipment required to be used for the service delivery. It becomes very difficult because once the condition of service is no longer good, and once government does not make the condition of service better for them, you see that everybody begins to look for opportunity of living to go and meet condition of service in a more better and friendly environment. These are some of the factors that were responsible. And I think too well too that you will discover that Joesu on one side had been on a constant struggle with governments ensuring that some benefits that were going to the medical doctors were not getting to them. Some activities that were supposed to be done by them were being hijacked by the medical doctors. All such factors were responsible for the in-house fighting within the health sector. And I largely want to say that in the health sector industry, if government wants to achieve a better condition of service for them, I want to ensure that these workers does not believe or begin to work towards the Japa syndrome. They should ensure that services that they render, tools and equipment are provided and made available for them to be able to do. We have better medical doctors, better health workers in Nigeria, considerable to other climes of the world. But today, you see them running out because ordinarily the government is not providing for them their needs as it ought to be.
Let's examine a bit further the Jackpot syndrome.
Yeah.
Between 2015 and now, I'm sure that your union must have some figures of the number of such health professionals that have decided to migrate to other parts of the world. And you must also have done some research to understand why that is actually happening. Is it just a matter of welfare? Is it just a matter of wages?
Yes, I think one of the reasons I will state clearly that you will recollect that there was even a time a government of another country came to establish a point of employment in Nigeria where they were employing medical doctors right in Nigeria here. And what were they doing that? They were doing it because they had shortfall of doctors in their own country and they needed to employ large numbers to fill in the gap. In a simple arithmetic of how many doctors to one to number of persons in citizens of a country, you will see that those people are now falling short of their own numbers of doctors in that country, and they needed to move our own people. And because the doctors, nurses, and other health workers in Nigeria discover that the pay in the other clime of the world is far higher than what they are paying them in Nigeria, they will prefer to go to that country and make more money, send it back to their people at home to survive. Two, the kind of services being rendered, that is condition of services and work environments in the other climes of the world, is far better than what we have in Nigeria. For that reason, they will prefer to go to the other part of the world, stay there and work and gather more experience, because the equipment and the technology being provided in that country is far over our own in Nigeria. And when they get there, they see that work and job is made easy because of technology. And for these reasons, they prefer to go there to get more experience, get more used to technology, to now apply the best of it on the people of the Western world.
And I'm just wondering why people like you have decided to stay back here.
Yes, I think we are just trying to stay behind to ensure that we add our own value to our country, because one day, Nigeria will be better for all of us, even after us.
Comrade Oda, can we say that it's all been stories of negativity and frustration in the last 8 years? Are there some areas, some high points in terms of government-labor relations?
Much as I will want to look at some of the positives of government-labor relations, I think at this point, at this stage of the program, we, the three of us, have not even touched the critical problems that organized labor have in the 8 years of this administration. We've not been able to adequately exhaust it. And I think it is important, if we are going to lay a foundation for the incoming administration, to identify, for example, that it is this government that has made strenuous efforts to roll back some of the gains of organized trade union in this country. Some of the gains that our forebearers, Pai Modu, Somonu, Chiruma, and the others had helped to win. And I'll give you one example. The Academic Staff Union of Universities went on strike over issues which I think Nigerians are very familiar with. And this government, in order to break it, started implementing the no pay,
No work,
no pay. I want to say that though this provision had been there in legal status, it's not being implemented, and it is because subsequent governments, even the military, recognize the fact that workers do not on their own just simply decide to use the instrumentality of the strike. It is when negotiations break down or when the employer refuses to be reasonable. And each time there is a strike, what has happened is in the course of calling off this strike, either through formal and informal consultation, and agreements are signed, it's always indicated as part of this agreement that there will be no victimization. And this has been one of the ways in which the trade unions have remained afloat and not suffered the consequences of having to withdraw their services as a result of recalcitrant employers. So what we have currently, this government, in order to show its muzzle for some of the things that it is complicit in, have now created a situation within the industrial relations setting in this country where the ability to go on strike is being severely compromised. I think this is a very negative thing, which I hope that organized labor will take up with the incoming administration.
Okay, Dr. Tommy Timokon, let me avert your mind to other aspects of labor government relations, industrial relations generally in the last 8 years of this administration. The administration in less than 1 month is going to be signing out, and then we will be having a new administration inaugurated. But in making projections for the future, we must look back and look at our present situation and see where we are and where we want to be as a people. Now, so much has been said about the fact that in the last 8 years, there haven't been deliberate official layoffs of workers, but that conditions for workers have not been that favorable, and so even the layoffs have continued to happen. For instance, the manufacturing sector has remained as dead or as comatose as it was perhaps about 10, 15 years ago. Not much improvement has happened in the last 8 years. There have also been the issues which you talked about earlier on of insecurity across the country that has resulted in many industries, even those that were able to operate, to either shut down or close down temporarily for one security reason or the other. So let's look at the cost of that to the Nigerian worker over these last 8 years.
Well, thank you. You know, let me cast our mind back because, you know, the labor government relations is very critical because they are partners in progress. So they must have a way of building that symbiotic relationship for productivity to strive. You know, and again, I said it without mincing words, when Buhari administration came into force, the workers were so excited, and it started well. And you look at the role played by the state government, especially when the federal government provided the bailout fund, was to pay the chunk of salaries that were owed in the states, and some of them decided to put the money in the bank to yield interest instead of addressing that issue confrontal. And, you know, that was intervention to build a very cordial labor management relations, you know. And the issue of the minimum wage from 18,000 to 30,000, which Mr. President approved, was also very encouraging. But what happened thereafter becomes an issue, because if you have so much money and inflation decided to deal with it, automatically you add nothing. And the informal economy that's supposed to have strived, thereby creating works, you know, were downplayed. You know, we talk about formalizing the informal economy. How can that be? Because when the policies are not tilted towards revamping the manufacturing industries, like you keep saying, I keep saying, you see, if workers are earning living wage, The spillover effect is that the worker will be able to have money and also save. And where workers save money, the banks will have money to give as loan to manufacturing industry. And thereby, once the manufacturing industry have money, they produce goods and services that, will be enough, to grow the economy. But again, the economy cannot grow where there are insecurity. The fundamental issue here is what we expected this administration, the outgoing administration, was that it's coming to tackle insecurity. As me and you know, we go to farm, even as civil servant, but you cannot go to farm because the fear factor will be there. They are going to be kidnapped. And you only now depend on the little money that, cannot even take you home because the transportation is already hitting, the education. How will you have such kind of maker salary and you are able to pay rent, pay your children's school fees, pay transportation to work, and then be motivated to work? These are issues. Then my colleague talks about, the deliberate attempts by government, to stifle the labor union because of the, where you are involved in collective bargaining agreement, that non-victimization clause is fundamental. In fact, you cannot even sign it until that is explicitly stated. But government technically want to stifle the end of the world. You see what played out. Even the May Day we are celebrating today in Eagle Square. We got approval. The next minute they withdraw the approval until workers now decided that they are going to hold it in the street. And of course, government realized that any attempts to do that will be counterproductive and quickly withdraw that. So it is obvious that even the incoming government should realize the power of Nigerian workers. Because if you build infrastructure, make everything, it is still the Nigerian worker that will operate it. If you bring artificial intelligence, it is still Nigerian worker that will punch the button and operate. So, if truly labor creates wealth, government should take labor to see as partners progress, but not to feel that we are another parallel government. No. We are partners in progress. And until employers of labor realize this, it will be difficult for them to really cope. The situation in the country today, we need them to think outside the box. Secondly, sir, if our charter of demand to the incoming administration is anything to go about, they must be able to engage people who are well endowed, not just politically minded, but who are seasoned professionals, to look at the issue and tell His Excellency, Mr. President, whenever it goes wrong, but not to play the role of sycophancy. Because what really killed the administration is people who are in government and demonstrated sycophancy. Where you know that the government is derailing, instead to put on track. Because a good policy must have a work plan for you to realize it. But instead of doing that, you find them going around telling Your Excellency, you are doing well, even when it's not doing well. And the workers are the ones suffering. So it's a concern to all of us, and it is very worrisome. We believe that the new administration will need to look at this. It is not too late for them to learn from the mistake of the past and see how they can correct it.
Let's look inside now. Let's look back at the labor unions themselves. How well they did in the last 8 years. There were a number of changes at different labor centers and all of that. How did that impact? How did that impact the welfare of workers and the relationship between labor and government?
To me?
Yes. So I come to you first.
Yes, thank you.
Before I come to Comrade Order.
I want to believe that in all the changes that takes place within labor cycle, either by leadership or by position being occupied, naturally, labor has a standard of its own policy working. So any man who comes there as a new person is meeting up the standard which labor has. You're not deranged from it. It is all about the struggle for the welfare of workers and Nigerian masses. Becomes your first standard. And at that point, if you are coming in there, since you have a standard for which is tall for you to meet up for the workers of Nigeria and the masses of Nigeria, you must first of all look at it at the point that you must achieve for them. Two, in the struggle for change of office, within labor in the last 8 years, you will agree with me that it has no longer been crisis as it used to be. It has been smooth transition from one leadership to the next leadership. And for that obvious reason, virtually all industrial unions within the country gave support to those who are within the hem of affairs and leadership of the organ, like the NAC. And they make sure that they rally around the ESCO to achieve the purpose of what they have as a target to achieve for Nigerian workers and the masses. In the same vein, I will equally say the labor leaders in Nigeria and the work class are the most patient and resilient set of people in the world. You can see protests in other side of the world when there are changes in leadership, ensuring that the demand of the workers are met at all costs. But in this country, when last did you see labor leaders occupy streets on protests? They show great understanding. The government has been the only one on the other side of the divide, ensuring that even the workers has their demand and protests to do, they make sure they avert the protests, work against the workers' interests, and give to workers what they feel they should give to workers.
Comrade Oda, Mr. Onu has talked about standards that are set at the labor leadership level and all of that. But even when there are standards, people come to power and to offices with their different strategies in meeting those standards. What have been the differences in terms of strategies by the various labor leaders that we have had in the last 8 years?
Okay, thank Max. I'm trying to be very careful now because having been an active player at the national level of the NSC, I don't want to join the bandwagon in saying things that may be interpreted differently. However, even today, when I was reading the Sun editorial, they did make the point which you had made, that the leadership of organized labor has not been as vibrant as it used to. And they cited by Modu, Somonu, Adams' leadership, which you know I was part of. Let me relate what happened last year when the Nigerian Labour Congress was launching the history of the NSC, which I had coordinated as part of the 40-year anniversary of the NSC. Comrade Adams Oshomole, when he was doing his remarks, said that if he were president of the NSC as of last year, he would have done much more than he did in terms of the campaigns, in terms of the standing up to government. And in simple words, what he was telling his colleagues was that you needed to up your game. Clearly, the challenges which organized labor leaders have now may not be the same when Adams was president of the NSC. But we have talked about the fact that the living condition of Nigerian workers have gone down as a result of wages that no longer are able to take the workers for the 30 days before a new salary comes. Therefore, it is the responsibility of leaders, that the current leaders of the NSC, to then fight to have a living wage, not just a minimum wage, but a wage which a worker who go to work constantly Monday to Friday for 1 month can guarantee that his family is able to feed, his family is able to have medical care, his family is able to have education. And to the extent that our wages are not able to provide this for the workers, it is the responsibility of the leaders, of all the trade unions, of all the national centers to fight for this. You see, for example, that in Europe, basically in England, in France, and other countries, right now, there's an increase in strike action. And this is because of the excruciating cost of living, which had made the wages that they are currently being paid not sufficient for them. And I think this is a cue that our trade union leaders in our country need to take, that the reason why they are elected to lead and appointed to lead organized labor is to fight to improve the living condition of their members. And once this is not happening, then there's a problem and we need to confront it. Let me also maybe divert a little bit to some of the statistics which the National Bureau of Statistics have given with respect to the economy of this country in the last 8 years. When the Buhari administration came in 2015, we had a debt burden of 17 trillion, which, if you take in the ratio of gross domestic product to debt, is just 13%. This government, as of December last year, has increased our debt burden to 45 trillion, thereby increasing the debt burden for Nigerians.
That's the external debt alone.
Yes.
External
to the
debt.
ratio.
If you add that to the internal,
Yeah.
the domestic debts, we're looking at 75, 77
Yeah.
trillion.
And then we're having a situation where, as of last year, we are using 96% of all the money we make to service these debts. Now, this is something that the unions need to address frontally, because it means that we are running an economy that is bound to collapse sooner than later. And we need to tell government that we cannot pretend that everything is okay when you have this type of indicators of the economy. We cannot pretend that everything is okay when you have people in our National Assembly behaving as if all is fine. I don't want to single out the National Assembly because they are not the most guilty. Within the executive is the most guilty when it comes to mismanagement of the economy of this country. And of course, the role that governors have played. The governors have been one of the destabilizing factor in this country, in our quest to consolidate democracy. Because well at the federal level, you have organized labor, civil society, and other segments of society putting spotlight on them. At the state level, these governors behave as if they are emperors, and they've refused to allow local government money to go down to the local governments. They spend money without reference to regenerating resources. A number of them just depend on the handout that come from the federation account and mismanage it seriously. So my point is, the trade unions need to take all of this into consideration and become more activist and put more pressure at the level of the states, at the level of the federal government, so that our country can be run properly in a way that we are not exactly a poor country. We have a lot of resources. What have been the problem of this country has been the regular mismanagement that have gone on in the country. I thought I should just make that point.
Dr. Okon, as we round off our discussion, let's look forward now. What do you think are the likely challenges, the future challenges that Labour is likely to confront as a new administration comes in?
Well,
at least let's look at the short-term period of 4 years.
Yeah, before I dwell into that, I want to also lend voice on what my colleague did say. You know, it is sorrowful in the sense that sometimes a perception could be wrong too, that the labor centers are not doing their best. But where you have environment you are operating, you know, you are also producing based on that environment you operate. I want to say this with all sense of modesty. Like engagement of government to even get that 30,000 naira minimum wage wasn't a tea party. And again, the backlog of promotion arrears which government owe in billions. Buhari administration came, the organized labor engaged the government, and we were able to achieve that. I for one, I led my CWC for the first time, Mr. President, to have received an affiliate where we lay bare what you've seen today as 40% peculiar allowance. So there's need for this engagement, but you also need to know that you cannot force government to see you until you, and to organize a strike is the most difficult thing. No union want to organize strike because it is very expensive. You look at the time, you look at the resources, you look at the energy you put in. But what we expect that the next government should look at, they should look, you know, what I tie the 3E approach of industrial relations, where we talk about the energy, the environment, and the economy. The energy in this context is the skill, the kind of skill that is required, you know, to meet up with the 21st developmental issues, you know, in labor administration. We want to also salute Buhari administration because at least for the first time, the Minister of Labor, I was part of those who review the labor law. So the Federal Executive Council has approved and passed it to the 9th Assembly. We just want to believe that that can pass, because a lot of challenges we have are born out of the absolute labor laws. Once the labor law is approved, a lot of employers of labor will now know, you know, what to do and will be a good guide. Then the incoming administration should look at the living wage. Just like my colleague did say, when we talk of minimum wage, let it be living wage. Because with the living wage, like I said, a worker will have the financial capacity and capability to play around, to see how he can diversify, even go into what we call vegetable garden, either poultry in the farmyard and so on, thereby making some level of earning to sustain. You need to look, the incoming administration need to look at that. The incoming administration need to look at the capacity and capability of who is engaging, especially in the ministerial portfolio of Ministry of Labor, which is very, very complex. Very complex. You need to look at that so that you understand the dynamism of that. That will also help in building very cordial labor management and labor government relations that will stand the test of time. For us as the labor union, we are not resting in our asses because a lot of our leaders have been built in terms of capacity. You know, that is enough energy of which you need. Then they must also look at the operating environment. You know, this may be overflow, but it is important because where you have all these and the environment, the operating environment is not conducive, there is no way you can get productivity, out of the environment. You find out if you go to Federal Secretariat, for instance, an office can house about 15 people, and yet they are already a foundation for development or expansion of a new secretariat. Why can't they build it and then open the space for this? And I want to also commend the head of service of the Federation, Dr. Folasha Yemi Enson. She has done well in terms of some policy that are tweeted towards making the civil service, one, to be efficient, effective, to be professional, and of course, to be meritorious. In terms of this,
the political leadership don't allow the civil service to work.
Putting this, into task. Look at the LEAP policy, the leadership enhancement program. That LEAP, if that is effective, honestly speaking, our own civil service will be one of the leading civil services. But that phrase, I am directed, place a question, because you can't do anything on your own. The creativity and the ingenuity of a younger person from the university in the service is called to question where the role is applied, who directed you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Etim Okon. Mr. Edoka, very quickly, maybe in 30 seconds, what would be your recommendations for the incoming administration?
I think from what my both colleagues have said, I will want to align completely that the incoming government should ensure that there is a need for them to sit down and look at the charter of demand of workers of Nigeria. Looking at those charter of demand, they should ensure that those charter of demands are actually studied and implemented one after the other.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, just basically to just say that already the stage is being set for a confrontation with the government, with the incoming government. If you have a situation where everybody is saying that you are going to remove the so-called subsidy on fuel price, and you have gone ahead to collect a loan of $800 million from the World Bank and the IMF, and you hope to split this with 50 million people, which comes to 7,000 one-off. And the confusion that is now going on.
$12 per person.
And the confusion that is right now going on, with some people are saying that the 40% adjustment in federal civil service is a prelude to the increase in fuel price. Once this government, the incoming government, does that, of course, the trade unions will be forced by their base to confront them. The second point, I think that any government that is coming...
Unfortunately, our time has run out. If you can mention it in 5 seconds.
Yeah, well, basically that about, because the huge unemployment, any government that is coming in, both at the federal and state government, needs to address the unemployment situation, both among the youth and the rest of the population.
Thank you so much. Comrade John Oda, former General Secretary of the Nigeria Labour Congress, currently the Executive Secretary of the Organizations of Trade Unions of West Africa, OTUA. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Comrade Onu Edoka, National Vice Chairman, Medical and Health Workers Union, and two-time chairman of the Nigeria Labour Congress in Kogi State. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And of course, we had Dr. Tommy Etim Okon, National President, Association of Senior Civil Servants of Nigeria, an affiliate of the Trade Union Congress, TUC. Thank you so much
very
for your
much.
time. All right, we wish the Nigerian workers a happy May Day. In spite of the harsh economic conditions, we will continue to survive. Thank you for investing your time with us, and we look forward to being with you again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Bye for now.